Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Sustainable Wine One Sip at a Time. I'm here with Beth with SIP Certified. This is one in a number of our Ascent series of ethical webinars. Good Impacts provides a number of services for ethical and mission-driven businesses, everything from project design and implementation all the way through helping create systemic change within industries. For more information, please feel free to visit goodimpacts.com to see how we can help you on your ethical business journey. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. This is probably not everybody's first webinar rodeo at this point. Everybody's cameras and mics are muted. We'll go ahead and leave them that way for the duration of Beth and my conversation. But please feel free to use the either the chat function or the Q&A function down at the bottom of your Zoom screen to post any questions or thoughts you may have along the way. And we'll save about 8 to 10 minutes at the end for questions. And then this webinar is being recorded for future use, so you'll be able to find it up on YouTube in a few days. A little bit of background about Beth. Beth is a program manager at SIP Certified, and she's really helped grow that program from its fledgling state to where it's at today, and the numbers definitely speak for themselves. And she's done this through her expertise and background in sales and marketing, and also, of course, public speaking, and being a professional harpist. Yeah. I got a break from the format already, Beth, to ask about that. How does that tie in, or does it tie into your work?
I don't think it ties in at all. Well, maybe. I guess you're still working with clients either way. But I've been playing the harp since I was, I think, 11 or 12. And I still do a couple of professional gigs a year. It could be like a luncheon or a wedding, something like that.
I feel like if you can play the harp, that's such a rare skill at this point. You've got it made.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah. So a little bit about the SIP Certified program. It's a rigorous, sustainable certification process that really relies on science and expert input for that independent verification and transparency. It's been around since 2008 and started off in a relatively small area in California and has subsequently grown to over 40,000 vineyard acres in California and in Michigan now. Wow, and nearly 45 million bottles of SIP certified wine. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of growth, and that's also a lot of wine.
Yeah, it's a lot of wine.
Beth, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the SIP certified program and what that looks like for wineries and how that process works.
Sure. So it's an annual certification, and as sustainability goes, it's holistic. So for vineyards and wineries, we're looking at the entire production from block to bottle. So if someone wants to get certified, they have to implement and document rules that are in the booklet, which is called the standards. And they look at all aspects of the operation, from habitat conservation to water quality to air quality, all the way into how the workers are treated and educated, and business sustainability itself too. So it's encompassing every single aspect of wine production. You could certify a vineyard, a winery, or both, for operations that have both, and then you can certify wines too. So anyone who's going through the vineyard and winery program, they document those standards. They're audited every year. The type of audit changes, so sometimes it's on-site, sometimes they're spot, surprise on-site ones, a lot of documentation checking. And then on the wine side, any wine that's made with at least 85% SIP certified fruit, and that could be estate or purchased, can include that logo on the bottle. So that's a handy tool for consumers to be able to recognize at the store shelf that they're buying a sustainably made product.
Excellent. And what did your journey look like to get to this program and helping vineyards and wineries undertake this?
So I got a degree in agricultural business at a college in California called Cal Poly. It's one of the Aggie schools in the state. They now actually have a wine and bit program too that's gotten really popular. But at the time I did agricultural business. For the first couple of years out of school, I didn't work in the wine industry at all, or even the ag industry. I worked for a custom sculptor who builds these beautiful trophies for the PGA. It was a really great learning experience, just in, kind of like business management, working with people from all over the world, all over the country. And then I was really looking to get back into the ag industry and, utilize the degree that I'd gotten, and stumbled upon this job managing the SIP certified program in 2009. And I really feel like in a lot of ways, I just kind of lucked out in being able to step into this position and work for a wonderful nonprofit. The nonprofit's actually been around since 1994, been around a long time. And the original focus was on promoting sustainable wine growing and providing education on it. And from there, just been working with the program every year, finding ways that we can improve the process for people who are getting certified, help their whole team incorporate sustainability into their own messaging, and all sorts of different projects along the way.
So if one didn't know any better, they would assume that the majority of your time is spent gallivanting from winery to winery, tasting and toasting the days away. But what does your work look like practically on a day-to-day basis, or even on an annual cycle?
Yeah, it definitely feels like it works on a bit of an annual cycle, because that's how our certification runs, is annually. There's not too much gallivanting from winery to winery. My time in the wineries is usually spent training their teams. So I will go out and help their tasting room staff, or maybe their sales teams, understand more about the program and how to communicate it, because sustainability is this really big kind of broad topic. So I love being able to help people with tools to talk about it more. But really, a lot of my time seasonally is managing the program itself, so helping people get through if they have any questions, coordinating, when audits come up, making sure everyone gets signed up for their audits and getting those pieces turned in on time. I work with a number of committees, so there's part of how we maintain the third-party certification is having a separate committee that actually determines whether or not someone's eligible for certification. So after they have their independent auditor review the documentation, it actually goes through a separate committee and they determine whether or not they're eligible. Also, the program is a living document. So sustainability doesn't really have a finish line. It's always improving with science and research. So we do that too. I have a group that's dedicated to reviewing any public comments or a couple of different standard chapters every year. So we're always updating that. Every 5 years, we do a peer review. So I'll send those chapters out to experts in that particular area. So it could be someone from the Environmental Protection Agency or a professor at UC Davis or someone from Cornell. And then we incorporate all of that feedback back into the program itself. So it's constantly improving. A new project, or a little bit more, I guess, of a focus for us lately is on the marketing piece. So helping people talk about sustainability. They've already gone through a lot of work and time and effort to get certified. So it's a really fun thing to talk about, another talking point. So we've launched a new, kind of program. It's a newsletter and a blog on our website that has marketing tips. And it's very turnkey. So something that someone could implement right away. The one that we have coming out tomorrow is a SIP Certified 101. So we're going to come up with a 4-part series of one-pagers that could be used in the tasting room, or pinned up on a staff wall or sent out to a sales team, so that they really get those talking points down. But we've also done them on ways to talk about sustainability in social media. We've done how to talk to consumers, different consumer groups about sustainability. So that's been a really fun thing to work on over the past couple of years, in addition to developing, marketing materials for retail displays and you name it.
What sorts of messaging have you seen resonate really well with consumers?
Something that I think always resonates well, because it's maybe a bit surprising, is talking about the people side. We say sustainability is the 3 Ps: people, planet, prosperity. And the planet's the very obvious one when you say sustainable, and it's also very visual. Especially if you're at a tasting room, you can look outside, you can see cover crops growing, you could see L boxes up. There's a lot of practices that are easy to talk about and visualize. But I think what resonates really well is talking about the people side. People are our most valuable resource. So talking about how providing education to your staff to not only keep them safe, but also to keep them engaged. We all feel so much more involved in our jobs when we understand not what to do, but why we're doing something, and helping people, move ahead in their career with organizations. And there's wonderful stories that come from our members where they have employees that have been with them for decades, because they provided a good place of work where they value their staff and they take care of them, by providing them with good benefits.
That's such an interesting and salient point, Beth, because I think oftentimes sustainability is viewed in sort of a cursory way as a great marketing asset. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it is, like you said, companies that are investing in sustainable practices should talk about it and they should be proud. But the cohesive and motivating effect that it has on teams, on employees, is huge. And I think sometimes organizations forget what a huge culture building benefit that kind of work can have.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, not only for them to be a good employer and to invest in their staff, but also as a staff person to work for an organization that genuinely cares, about how they're taking care of their people and the planet. It's kind of a win-win all around. And it's something that we found that's interesting is that we would almost wish that people in the program would use it more as a marketing tool. A lot of the times people say they get into the certification because it's the right thing to do. So they're true believers in being sustainable and being ahead of the curve and doing, the best job that they can.
I think a lot of us working in sustainability have experienced that. There's almost a weird reticence on the part of true sustainability leaders in the business community to talk more about what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
Sure. I mean, maybe it's being humble, or maybe another thing is it could just become very commonplace, because to them it's just natural. This is how you should be doing things. So they don't think of it as being something special, especially in farming, you need to preserve the land so that you can continue having your wine production for years to come. So that's just, in some ways, maybe just a natural part of what makes sense to do in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I do want to grab those folks by the shoulders, though, and shake them and say, you have to talk about what you're doing. You have to prove that, it can be done and you can still make a profit. Like you said, you can hit those 3 Ps. You don't have to sacrifice one or more for the others.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're not making a profit, you can't continue to have good practices with the people on the planet. So you need that 3rd P to continue doing good work.
So you've already talked a little bit about it, but in working with a number of different wine producing businesses and helping them along their mission driven, their ethical journey, what are some of the similarities or some of the through lines you've seen from these businesses?
And the people who are getting certified?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like I said before, I guess, the biggest similarity is that people genuinely believe in it. And that's really just such a nice experience. And that's something that we found a long time, I think, because of the culture of our organization. When we started in '94, it was a group of farmers that wanted to find ways to farm better, farm more sustainably and learn from each other. So they would just meet in someone's field on the back of a tailgate and talk about resource issues. If it was, California irrigation efficiency is a big thing, or pest issues or safety trainings. And that's just such a huge component of it. And I think another thing that people really get out of the certification program is that learning aspect. And SIP Certified actually started out in '96 as the first self-assessment for sustainable vineyard farming. So it was a way for people to go through this checklist and say, I'm doing this, to prevent erosion. I'm doing this thing to, manage my pests. I'm taking care of my employees this way. And we'd say, while you go through this checklist, think about practices that you aren't doing and implement them. And we'd have people take the self-assessment in subsequent years, and we found that those scores were always improving. So people were actually implementing these practices by going through the self-assessment. And so they still find the same thing today by going through the certification, because we are always updating the program. It's a really useful learning tool still. And I think another component that comes up a lot, because it is so holistic, is it helps our members maybe communicate a little bit more between departments. You know, a lot of times you end up with like a vineyard crew, you've got your winery crew, you've got your tasting room crew, you have your marketing team or your sales team, and they aren't necessarily interacting as much. But because of the certification, while we're asking questions about all of these aspects, they need to interface a little bit more to get through the certification. So that's a nice perk, I think, that people get that wasn't maybe expected.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about whether it's within an organization or across organizations in an industry, having that, both the shared accountability, but also the shared solidarity and sort of camaraderie and that best practice sharing. Mm-hmm. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, the sharing best practices is a really interesting thing. That's always been a fun part of we still call them tailgate meetings when people go out, not during this year, but go out in the field and, chat about what they're doing. There's a lot of sharing, and it's really interesting to see farmers from, this kind of wide swath of the Central Coast have these conversations with each other about like what they've tried and what's worked and what hasn't worked based off of their different situation and what they're growing. And there's genuine interest and a real drive to, I think, want to improve and help each other, do a good job.
So if I'm a relatively small or a relatively new vineyard or winery, I feel like I'm doing a good job. I'm doing what I can to take care of my employees. I'm using a little pesticide, but I'm not using a ton. I'm trying to do the right things. Why should I get a SIP certification?
So the whole reason the program was developed was to help our members validate their claim to sustainability. And so we actually made the program as a request of our growers that we work with. It started in the early 2000s, and they came back to our group and said, there's a lot of green claims in the marketplace. That's when organics was really growing substantially. But then you see other things too, where something might be marked as being all natural, but there's not always something to back that up with. And they said, if we're going to put a claim of sustainability on our bottle, we want something with teeth to validate that claim, so that anyone who purchases my wine wants to know like what on earth that means to say that I'm sustainable, can come back to the certification program and see exactly what that means that they're doing to be able to make that claim.
So how have you seen the overall industry, not just the folks that you work with, but the overall industry? How have you seen their understanding and feelings really and perception around sustainability change over the past several years, or has it changed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in some ways, because the mission of our nonprofit is promoting sustainable wine growing, we sort of self-selected for people who are already interested in it. But I think what has changed is maybe the marketplace. There's a lot more knowledge and interest in it, especially when someone's selling their wines to a retail store. We hear more and more that the trade, now knows what SIP certified is. They're asking questions about sustainability, and those questions are getting more specific. Maybe 5 years ago, they would say, are you sustainable? And you could answer yes, and they would just move on from the conversation. Whereas now they might ask something a little bit more in depth. Well, they'll say like, okay, well, what are you doing to manage your water? Or how are you taking care of your employees? So they're getting a lot more detailed in wanting to know what sustainability means. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest shifts, is just the general knowledge about it.
Oh, that's really exciting, because that level of enhanced consumer awareness, I think, makes it more difficult to engage in greenwashing for those businesses that,
definitely
committed can really point, like you said earlier, they can point to, here are our practices, and
Mhm.
here's exactly what we're engaged in, and their competitors can't.
Yep, exactly.
So for the sake of fairness and opening it up to more voices, couple of questions from the audience that I'm seeing coming through. How is the SIP certification similar or different from other certifications like organics or B Corp or Fair Trade or other things like that?
Yeah, so it's going to function similarly in some ways in that it's independent, it's third party. In terms of organics, that's actually the most common question we get is like, what's the difference between the two? There's definitely overlap, and we have people who are certified organic and SIP certified. They'll incorporate, both practices, and there's overlap in the kind of soil preservation portions of it. But the cool thing about sustainability is that it's looking at even more than that, and that's where we're going into addressing air quality, water quality, habitat conservation, how the people are treated, recycling programs. So it's going beyond some of the components that organics is addressing too.
Gotcha. Couple of questions regarding cost and what that looks like. Is it on a one-time, an annual, a sliding scale?
Yeah, so it's on an annual basis and it's based off of the size of the operation. So for vineyard certification, it ranges between $5 and $20 an acre, depending on how big you are. Wineries is per gallon of capacity, tanks and barrels, and that's like on the cents. And then wine certification is similar. I think it's like 5 to 16 cents a case for wine certification. And so for vineyards and wineries, you get certified annually, and so you'd pay that certification fee annually. With the wine certification, that's on an as-needed basis, so when you're bottling, basically. And so someone might, audit their past couple of vintages all in one go, whites and reds, and so you would pay on that. And that's also aggregated too, so if there's an owner that has multiple properties, we aggregate the number of bottles that are getting certified over the year, or we aggregate the acreage that they own, even if they're in separate locations.
Okay. Gotcha. Let's see. Which states are you guys currently in? And I know, Beth, you're working in California and Michigan. Any plans to move to other states anytime soon?
Well, we're always open to working with other states too. We ended up in Michigan because Chantel at Waterfire, contacted us a couple of years ago to get certified. And she was looking for a certification program and she stumbled across ours and was interested if, we could do it in Michigan too. So we piloted it with her, to see how it would work. And it turns out it actually works great. The only major differences that we ran into California versus Michigan wise was around the water use practices. In California, we have significantly less available water than in Michigan. So there's only a couple of standards that just didn't really apply as well, in Michigan, because you guys aren't usually irrigating as much, as we would need to in California. But, going through that process with her, we found that 98% of the standards still worked really well. And we were able to just tweak a couple so that they applied to a different climate. So yeah, we're always open to working with someone else in a different state to try that out as well. And a cool thing too about certification with us is that self-assessment is still a part of the program. So you can go onto our website and sign up to do the program for free as a self-assessment and use it as a learning tool or roll into certification down the line too, if you're interested in that.
Excellent. A couple other questions related to just what the certification process looks like and what kind of support you or your team can provide when folks are trying to figure out that assessment.
Sure. So the program is annual. It starts December 1 for vineyards and wineries. We send out helpful emails once a month as reminders. There's 14 chapters to get through. So we'll recommend working on a couple of chapters each month so that you have all of your documentation in place. For someone who's new to the program, I'm always available if you're not sure how to document something or if you just want like a cross-check, I can help with that. And there's a couple of templates in there, but usually the standards are pretty specific. Like you need to have a winter cover crop, upload a picture of your cover crop. So that's the main part of the process. Audits happen in summer between June 1st and July 15th. It's done primarily remotely because all that documentation is in an online database. And then the auditors will come on site as well to do a drive around the property with you. And then that all gets approved by our committee in the fall. And then that kind of completes your certification for the year as everyone rolls into harvest. And so beyond that, that's when we're providing our, marketing tools, ideas, support, any kind of a training for your teams, which we can do virtually, of course, too. And then it starts over the next year. And usually the first year is the most time intensive, getting that documentation together the first time, maybe putting some systems into place. But after that, if it's 80 hours the first year to get it going, usually it's 20 hours a year after that to maintain the certification. So the amount of documentation is less, the amount of time you're spending maintaining it's less, and then the audit time is shorter too.
Okay, gotcha. And just to clarify, if folks are interested, the process needs to start for them in December, or that's when you recommend that they start the process to be ready for auditing?
Recommend that they start. So that's technically our certification year is December 1 through November 30. But I've certainly had people join in the program in March, and still get certified that year. They just have to make sure that they've been adhering to the standards since December 1. Okay. So that's, the main part of the time frame too. But, if someone wants to join later in the year, they can always do that.
Okay, gotcha. And yeah, I think we've got time for probably one more question. So I don't own a winery, but I visit a lot of them. How can I encourage more wineries to sign up for this program?
Nice. Well, you can always just ask them if they're SIP certified. I think that's a great way to go about it. Our website is sipcertified.org, so that would be a nice source for you to look for some other wines that are in the program if you're shopping around that way, and always directing those other brands to us as well. And we'd be happy to help them, and they can come check out the program and hopefully join in.
I'm gonna throw screen share back up so I can share your information, Beth. Maybe if I can figure out how to make, there we go. All right, so a couple of ways that folks can connect with you and with the program. They can always visit sipcertified.org. They can reach out to you, Beth, at vineyardteam.org. Is that going to be the best email?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, perfect. And then by phone, and they can follow you guys on Instagram. Any other good ways for folks to connect, Beth?
I think those are the best ways to connect with us. We're on Instagram and Facebook at SIP Certified. And people are really interested in learning more about the technical side of viticulture and winemaking. We have a great podcast called Sustainable Winegrowing. So that's a wonderful thing to listen to. We do episodes every twice a month, and we interview people from all over the world. So that's another cool opportunity if you just want to learn more about sustainable wine growing and what's current research for the wine industry.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'll make sure I include that URL when we throw this video up on YouTube. And speaking of which, a couple of great ways to stay connected with Food Impact and our work. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like I mentioned, this webinar and all the other ethical entrepreneur and mission-driven business webinars we've done are available there. And you can always send us thoughts and feedback about this or other webinars. We love to hear if they're working and what we can do better. And you can also always feel free to drop me a line, nick@goodimpacts.com. Anything else for the fine folks before we call it a day, Beth?
Well, I really appreciate you having me on and everyone's interest in sustainability. And yeah, definitely feel free to use this as a resource, through the podcast, the certification program, or using it as a self-assessment. We have a lot of really good resources on viticulture that we're glad to get out there.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Beth. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.